All right, today we have Mr. James Devine. He was once a little boy named Jimmy, whose mom told him he could be anything he wanted, a policeman, a doctor, a lawyer, even the President of the United States. He exceeded all of her expectations and became a music teacher. Now, as a grown man with four children, he wants to let you know that he did marry his high school sweetheart, which is awesome. And he has nine grandkids. He loves eating pizza, mountain biking, and spending time with family, long walks in the mountains, and holding hands with his high school sweetheart. His shoe size is 9.5, but he says, please don't send him any shoes. And he wants to let you know that he's a middle school music teacher at a Title I school and still finding time to speak, write, and podcast. He earned his bachelor's degree from St. Joseph College of Maine and received his music education for the Army School of Music, graduated from basic training, intermediate, and advanced courses over a span of 10 years, serving in Virginia, Japan, and Colorado. He retired from the Colorado National Guard in 2006. He earned his teaching license from Western State College in Colorado and completed a master's degree in music education from Southwestern Oklahoma State University. He believes in the value of lifelong learning and he doesn't just like standardized testing. All right. Thank you, Mr. Devine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What we're going to be talking today is about goal setting and even how to become a millionaire. And that'll kind of come at the end after we've been talking about the goals a little bit. We all kind of understand goals when it comes to like things like soccer and basketball. We understand that that's like when you get the ball in the hoop or in the net, then it's a point. And in those games, you don't get points for being close. You might get groans from the crowd. You might get disappointment or happiness, depending on which side you're on. But in life, the difference is that we can get points even for being close. And we'll talk about that a little bit also. Now, one of the things we have to think about is the difference between a goal and a dream. And I'll just kind of put it in silly terms. I'm a 58-year-old man, so I might dream about being part of the NBA, but that's not going to happen. It doesn't matter how much I practice basketball. I'm not going to be, I don't have the right height. I'm too old. And so a goal is something where we can take concrete steps to take us toward that goal, whereas a dream can sometimes be a good thing. I'll give you an example of a dream that turned into a goal. I'm on the board of Sarah's Home, which is an organization that rescues sex trafficked girls. And we had a dream that seemed like it would never come true of building a home for boys. And about 2 years ago, that dream started having steps that took it into action. So sometimes dreams can be the where we plant the seeds, or they can plant the seeds to things that will later become goals. I don't know why this works, but if you have kids, this is something you can explain to them as well too. For some reason, if we write stuff down, whether that be goals or the project that's due or a phone number, whatever we write down, we are more likely to remember it. And there's a lot of research that shows that to be true. So I always write my goals down. I eventually type them into the computer, but when I'm first working on them, I actually write them down. Now, goals have to be SMART. And SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. And I'm just going to give a little bit of time to each one of those. So specific, it has to be something you can tell if you've made that goal or not. So for example, if you said, I want to save up $100, that's pretty specific. If you just say, I want to save more money, that's not specific enough. Another thing that some people might look at it is like, oh, I want to be a better person. That's not specific enough. How do you measure whether you're a better person? I want to show gratefulness by writing 5 thank you letters a week or a month or a year, whatever it might be. Now that's something that's more specific, and you can say, yes, I made that. I became a better person. The M stands for measurable. I want to be more thankful. How do you measure that? That's pretty hard to measure, but we can say, I want to lose 100 pounds, or I want to lose 10 pounds, or I want to save $1,000, or I want to send 3 thank you notes a week. Those are all things we can measure and determine, did we meet our goal or not. It has to be, the A in SMART stands for achievable. If you want to lose 100 pounds, that would be a pretty big goal. And if you said, I want to lose that 100 pounds in a year, that would be achievable. Approximately 50 weeks, divide that into 100 pounds, and you're talking about losing 2 pounds a week. That's achievable. But if you said, I want to lose 100 pounds by next Tuesday, then that's probably not achievable, not while maintaining your health and sanity. The R in SMART stands for relevant. And going back to that basketball, the silly example I used, that goal is not relevant to me. I don't even like playing basketball. So it's not a goal I would set. I might play basketball with my grandkids or with the kids at school. But it's not I don't have any goals related to basketball because it's not relevant to me. I have some goals in my music, and I have some goals in my finances. And someone listening today may say, well, I don't care about music, but I definitely have goals in basketball. So for you, that would be relevant. And then the T stands for time-based. So going back to that losing weight, if we wanted to lose 10 pounds this month, or 100 pounds in a year, or we want to read 50 books in a year, those are all time-based, and we can measure that. So we want the goals to be SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So let's take a look at why some people fail at this. A lot of people try to set New Year's resolutions, and there's a lot of research around this too, that New Year's resolutions almost never happen. If I don't remember the exact stats, but gyms, fitness gyms, they sell like twice as many memberships as what they're capable of actually hosting in their gym, because there are so many people who their New Year's resolution, I'm going to go work out, I'm going to lose weight. It's not specific enough. And so they get that membership, and maybe they go once or twice. Maybe the gym is full in January, and then it just ends up dying out. Most New Year's resolutions fail because they don't even start with the S, usually not specific enough. So let's take a look at a way that someone could turn a goal from not being specific enough, or use this as a goal setting procedure. If you said, I want to get smarter, there's so many things that are wrong with that. There's no way, it's not specific enough. But if you say, I want to read more this year, now we can say that it's specific. I want to read 50 books this year, or 20 books, or 10 books. Now it's measurable. I want to read 50 books a year, and so that's one a week. That's probably achievable. But 1,000 books, if you said I want to read 1,000 books in 2025, it's probably not achievable. For the R, relevant, will reading help you be smarter? More than likely. It depends what you read, but that would be pretty relevant in that goal. And then timely. We talked about the example, if you said, I want to read 50 books a year, that would be 1 book a week and taking 2 weeks off. Or if you said, I want to read 12 books this year. Now that's something that you can put on the time, and you can see, am I on track for reaching that goal? Let's talk about goal failure, because this is something that a lot of people misunderstand. They set their goals tiny, and I'll just give you the example in education. They hold our goals against us sometimes in education, not in a positive way. Like you say, I'm shooting for this way up here. I want every single one of my students to get an A. Then sometimes they'll say, oh, that's a great goal. And then because you only get 90%, 98% of your students getting an A, then they say, oh, you failed your goal, Mr. Devine. But some other teacher that says, I want 60% of my students to pass my class, and then they get 70% to pass their class. Then sometimes in education, they say, oh, that other teacher, they met their goal and exceeded their goal. And so, unfortunately, in our society, that's sometimes how goals are looked at. But I want you to shift your thinking in this. Because if you set a goal, for example, of reading 50 books a year and you only read 49, or you set a goal to lose 40 pounds this year and you only lose 37 by the end of the year, have you failed your goal? I would say no, because you set a high goal that was achievable. You didn't quite make it to that, but you did a lot better than what you would have done if you hadn't set the goal. So if you go back to that reading example, if one person sets a goal of reading 50 and they read 47, and someone else sets a goal of reading 25 books, but they read 30, you can see that that first person is way better off. So set high goals in the areas that you set goals for. And if you don't quite achieve them, then that's okay. You revise them. Sometimes I revise my goals in the middle of the year. I always do my goals. I sit down in the month of November and I think about what do I want to accomplish the next year, and I write those things down and then set those goals for myself. But I often revisit that in June. Sometimes maybe I'm off track because other things have taken the place, so I need to revise it. Instead of losing 30 pounds, I adjusted 15, or something like that. So sometimes it's okay to adjust those goals, or maybe I met the goal already, but it's only June. And so now I want to set a bigger goal for myself because I didn't realize I would get it in that short of a time. Ultimately, goals have to be carried out day by day. It's not a one and done. If you want to get more fit, you can't just go to the gym for a week and then say, I'm done. You can't even go to the gym for 3 hours a day for a month and then take 11 months off. It's not going to do you any good. You might be in the gym more than other people if you looked at the total time spent in the gym for the whole year, but it's not going to do you any good. So goals have to be carried out day by day. A year and a half ago, I really did need to lose about 20 pounds. And so I set a goal from October to December of 2023 that I was going to lose 2 pounds a week. I couldn't wait till the end of that 3 months to start implementing my changes in my behavior. I had to do that all throughout everything that I was doing. It wasn't fun. I had to eat less sugar than I normally would eat. And I love sugar. I love ice cream. I love sweets. I love baked goods. I had to eat more vegetables, and vegetables are something I do not like very much at all. But I would weigh myself every Monday to see where I was at with my goals. And some weeks I only lost 1.5 pounds. And it's like, okay, I need to do a little bit more this next week. And then maybe that next week I would lose 2.5 pounds and make up for it. But I couldn't wait until Monday to do the right thing. I had to eat right all week long. And the measuring of my weight was just kind of a test to see how I was doing. Sometimes the one thing that you have to do, you have to think of it as being like a frog. Imagine that you had a to-do list today, and your to-do list was, I got to fold some clothes, I got to read a book, I've got to take my dog for a walk, I have to wash the dishes, I have to study for my college test, and I have to eat a frog. Well, the hardest thing about that list of things would be eating the frog. But if you ate the frog first, as soon as you got up, you said, I'm going to do the hardest thing I have to do today now. It's going to make everything else seem easy. So you get that frog, tilt your head back, drop it in, chew it, and let the guts splash all over your mouth. But then it's done. You're not dreading it all day long. I'm trying to wonder if you are going to have the strength and the desire to do that. That's how exercise is for me. I hate to say it, I do not like exercise. And so that's one of the things I do early in my day, because if I don't, I'll just keep putting it off, and then I'll say, oh, I'm too tired in the evening. So it's about the third thing that I do every day. I like how exercise makes me feel. I love how I feel after. I love the long-term benefits for my health. But on a day-to-day basis, I do not like it at all. Now, something related to goals is called let me stop and just ask if there's anybody who has any questions at this point. Any thoughts, questions?
There's nothing in the chat so far, but maybe somebody wants to speak up and share their thoughts.
I'll put a few spots in the presentation. So if you would come up with a question, put them in the chat, and Aisha is going to be monitoring that, and she's going to read those out for me. Or when we come to those spots, if you want to unmute and ask your question, then that would be great too. There's something called, it looks like we have all adults here today, but there's something called the success formula that you can teach your kids. And it's not late, it's not too late for you either, even if you maybe have not made it through all these things. But the success formula are 3 steps that will avoid a person living in a state of poverty in the United States. 97% of those who do these 3 things, who are in their 30s, are not in poverty. 97% who do these 3 things are not in poverty. Half of adults who don't do these things are living in poverty in their 30s. And the 3 things are: number 1, get your high school diploma. School is your kid's job. And if you can get them going on that and getting their diploma. When I used to teach high school, I could not believe this would happen. There would be kids who they struggled all through school, but they were just barely making it by. They had straight D's, and they were on track to graduate, not with honors or anything, but they were on track to graduate. The end of April of their senior year, some of them would quit. And you'd try to reach out to them and you'd say, hey, you have a month left. You're going to make it. Yes, it's going to be hard. You're barely going to make it, but finish out this 1 month. And some of them would quit right during that time. I was really blessed that my mom really put a big value on education. And she told me and my sister that was our job, is to get our education. And she appreciated it because she only had a 1st grade education. So she said she was going to make sure her kids were going to get educated. So the success formula, number 1, get your high school diploma. Number 2, get a full-time job. And this is something you can teach to your kids. When I taught at that same high school, it was a kind of a small community. I taught out at Falcon for 13 years. And I would always bump into current or former students at the grocery store. And sometimes I would ask them, hey, how are you doing? It was 4 years ago you graduated. What are you up to now? Oh, I'm saving money for college. So, oh, that's cool. What's your progress for college? Well, I haven't been able to save any money yet. I'm working about 8 or 10 hours a week at the Pizza Hut. It's like, you're not working to save for college. You're working for pocket money and really not getting anything done. So step 2, get a full-time job. And then step 3, get married before having kids. These are something you can teach to your kids for 97% success rate of avoiding poverty. When we talk about goals often involve delayed gratification. We're going to talk about a couple of terms here that sometimes people confuse what these mean. Net worth. If you take everything you own and you subtract everything you owe from that, what you are left with is your net worth. So to put it in the simple terms, if all you owned was 1 car and it was worth $20,000 and you owed $15,000 on it, your net worth would be $5,000. 20,000 minus 15. As we get older, that becomes more complex as we have a house, and that has its own value, as well as we have savings as our house fills up with more things. But basically, net worth is if you take everything you own and subtract everything you owe, that what's left is your net worth. Um, a millionaire, a lot of times people think a millionaire is someone who has $1 million in their pocket or has $1 million available to them. If I owned nothing and I went and borrowed $1 million from Aisha, do you have $1 million to loan me, Alicia? Aisha?
Not today.
Not today. Not today. If she gave me $1 million in cash and gave me a note and I owed her $1 million, I would not be a millionaire, because remember that net worth example. I borrowed $1 million and I have $1 million, but I owe $1 million. And when I subtract that, my net worth is $0. It might look like I'm rich. I might have a lot of money that I can spend. But then as soon as I spend it, if I spend it on the wrong things, if I spend it to throw a big party for everyone on the Zoom call, then I'm going to have a negative $1 million net worth, because I'm still going to owe Aisha $1 million. So a millionaire is someone whose net worth is $1 million or more. So I just want to kind of break this down for you. I've been a teacher most of my life, and before that, I was enlisted in the Army. My wife has a regular job. She's a dental hygienist. Neither of them are, both of them are good paying jobs. I think a lot of teachers complain too much. But we definitely didn't go into teaching for the money, but it's a comfortable living. We are, my wife and I are probably a year or a year and a half away from being millionaires. And we didn't inherit any money. When my mom passed, I inherited about $8,000 from her a couple of years ago. My wife's parents are still living. So none of that came from gift from anybody or an inheritance. We started saving 15% of our income in about 2005. So about 20 years ago. And it's just grown slowly. It's like anything else that we want to do in our lives. You can't do it instantly. You can't lose weight by saying, I'm going to eat well today, and then tomorrow I'm going back to having my half gallon of ice cream every night. It's not going to work. More millionaires are teachers than just about any profession. I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if it's because it makes sense to the teachers in a mathematical way, or maybe they're good about starting to put money away when they're younger. But more millionaires are teachers than any other profession. Our net worth right now is $840,000. Now, it doesn't mean I have money rolling off of me. I'm going to share with you a couple of things that we did to get to this. But I want to go back a little bit. So actually 2003 was when we first started getting a little bit serious about getting our finances in order. And I started keeping track of our net worth. We had a home for about 11 years at that point. So most of that net worth was from our home, the value in our home, minus what we still owed on it. But in 2003, our net worth was 55,000. In 2005, it was 79,000. In 2010, it was 114,000. You can see just 15 years ago, it wasn't even that huge. 2015, 215,000. 2020, 520,000. And now we're at 840,000 for our net worth. So it starts really jumping. And how did we do it? In 2003, we made sure to get out of debt. I think we had a few small car loans or something. We never had a huge amount of debt, but we started working on getting out of debt. Once we did that, we started saving 15% of our earnings. We just pretend like it's sort of like we pay ourselves first. So we don't even miss that. It automatically comes out of our bank account. We buy good used cars and then drive them forever. I'll tell you our vehicles right now. My wife drives a 2017 Subaru with over 100,000 miles. I drive a 2004 Ford Expedition with 265,000 miles. I feel like I'm in heaven because my father-in-law just gifted a vehicle to me. He's not able to drive anymore. And so that's become my main driver. And that's a 2011 Hyundai Santa Fe. So you can see we buy decent cars, we drive them until they're not worth fixing anymore. We've had several cars that have gone to 250,000 miles or more. Um, we avoid debt. So once we got out of debt about 20 years ago, the only debt we have is our home. Um, we budget. When you budget, you find out where your money's going, because if you don't decide in advance, it's sort of like if you're trying to diet and you don't realize, oh yeah, I'm working late tonight, I might want to pack a sandwich or a snack, then it's going to be too easy to go and eat something that breaks your diet. But if you plan ahead, then you can say, I'm going to bring a sandwich or a salad, and that's going to satisfy my hunger. It's going to cost me less. But the same thing with our money. We have to decide in advance where it's going to go. Otherwise, if we just look at our bank account and say, oh, we've got some money in there, we can go out to eat tonight, then we're going to wonder, where did all our money go? We never made this much before in our lives, and we don't know where it all went. I was lucky that I found out this when I was young. When I was about 17, I was working a lot, probably 25, 30 hours a week when I was in high school. But I felt like I didn't have any money. I had a car payment, but I was living at home. My mom paid for all my food. I had the insurance and the gas for my car. So I took a notebook, and for a month, I wrote everything down. Remember, we talked earlier about the importance of writing things down. I wrote everything down that I spent for a month. And I found out that Pizza Hut and Taco Bell and Kentucky Fried Chicken were getting most of my earnings from work. And I was like, I can't keep doing this. Why am I going to work 30 hours a week to spend most of my money at these fast food places? But that was a big eye opener for me. And I realized that I needed to get control of that. And that's when I actually started budgeting. Um, I had a coworker at one time, and she was a teacher, so I know she made about what I made. And her husband was an engineer, and I know he probably made more than what my wife made. And we were talking at lunch one time, and this was back in 2006, when I was celebrating my 20th anniversary. We were going on a cruise, and this coworker, she said, "A cruise? I wish I could go on a cruise," as she was sipping her Starbucks. Nothing's wrong with Starbucks. Don't get me wrong. If you want to spend your money on Starbucks, that's okay. But I asked her, I said, well, how much did that Starbucks cost you? And she said, oh, about $5. And I said, do you like does your husband get Starbucks too? Because I always saw her every day with her Starbucks. And she said, oh yeah, we love our Starbucks. And so at the time, I don't know what I think that they cost more now. But at the time, they were spending about $10 a day between the two of them for Starbucks. Now, if you start adding that up, that's $300 a month. That's $3,600 a year in 2005 that they were spending on Starbucks. On our cruise, we spent about $2,500 to go on a 1 week cruise. The flights and everything was about what we spent. So I said to her, I said, if you just give up your Starbucks for a year, you could go on that cruise as well. And she thought about it for a minute, and then she said, that's stupid. And so it's not stupid. There's nothing wrong with Starbucks. I enjoy a Starbucks myself occasionally, but when I start seeing what's a more important goal for me than that, traveling with my wife is a much more important goal than having Starbucks every day. So I make my own coffee at home for about 10 cents a cup instead of $7 a cup. There's a guy on the radio. Different people have different feelings about him, but his name's Dave Ramsey, and he's created something he calls the baby steps. And these are the steps. You can maybe create this as your own plan for becoming a millionaire. And it's not a overnight thing. Like, as I told you, it's in 20 years, from 2003, where we had a net worth of 55,000, to 2025, where we have a net worth of 840,000. It didn't happen overnight. There were some years it went down some with the market, and or we had setbacks in our lives, illnesses sometimes, and we weren't able to save that 15% that year, job changes and losses. But over the long term, it has worked. But he talks about this, he calls them his baby steps that he's talked about. So the first step in his baby steps is to start saving towards a $1,000 emergency fund. Most of the time, we can kind of predict the things that are going to happen in our lives. A car is going to break down, and $1,000 will cover a good portion of most of those repairs. But if we don't have even that $1,000 set aside, then we end up having to go into deeper debt, and that gives us a negative net worth. And then he talks about eating. His joke is that tonight we're having rice and beans, tomorrow we're having beans and rice, and then the next day rice and beans. So you can eat cheaply if you look for ways to make it cheap. And just a hint, DoorDash is not cheap. I've used DoorDash maybe twice in my life, and I was shocked at how much it was. And it's like, if anything, I'll just drive there myself if I ever need to get that. Step 2 in his baby steps, he says pay off debts smallest to largest. And why he says smallest to largest is you start getting momentum. We were fortunate; we didn't have much debt, but we started putting all of our extra money to that car payment, and then before I knew it, we were paid off with that. But let's say if you had 10 debts, you pay the smallest amount to each of them that you're allowed to pay without going into default, and any extra money you put to the smallest one. When you get that smallest one paid off, you take all that money and put it to the next smallest one, and then it kind of snowballs, and before you know it, you have paid off all the debts, and then you can go to step 3. Step 3 is a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Why 3 to 6 months? Because most things in life, there are things outside of the norm that we can't really control. But most things, whether it's a job change or a job loss or a health problem that creeps up, most things, if we have 3 to 6 months of our finances stored up, we can cover that ourselves without going into deeper debt. So that's where that 3 to 6 months comes from. And then steps 4, 5, and 6 is really kind of all bunched together, but it's like start paying extra on your house, start saving 15% of your money to invest in. So like we have our 6-month emergency fund that we have to the side, and we don't ever touch that unless there's a real emergency. And then we have money that we're saving for vacations and trips and for retirement. And those are all steps 4, 5, and 6. So our house isn't paid off yet, but we just have been able to start paying double payments on those, on that house. And we're hoping to be paid off in the next year or two for our house. I'll stop here for a moment and see if there's any questions, comments, complaints.
I think this is good information. I've been working on trying to pay debt off doing the snowball effect too. And I was able to pay 8 small accounts off yesterday. So I'm
Awesome.
I like that.
Awesome. Sometimes I think Ramsey talks about this as well. Have a little celebration, like maybe you say, okay, since we paid off 8, we're going to go out to eat, or something you don't normally do. And that can kind of give you a boost in those celebrations. But congratulations on doing that.
Thank you.
I'm just saying that we need.
Hold on, I'm gonna grill.
Did someone else have a question? I see someone in the main part of the screen, but I don't hear anyone. All right, we're going to go to the to the next part. Sometimes people will say, but I have no time. I don't have time to work extra to pay off my debt, or to start losing weight, or to start reading more. But when you think about it, we all are given the same amount of time. There's something that, as I look at you guys on the Zoom call, it looks like we have a pretty young group here. You have something that Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and President Biden and President Trump, even something they don't have. They can't buy back any of the time that's gone in their lives. They're older, and they may have more money than you and I, all of the people that I mentioned, but they don't have the time that you have. And we each are given 525,600 minutes a year, and we have a choice of what to do with that. And just like we budget our money to kind of figure out where it goes, sometimes you can do a time audit where you write down everything you're spending time on. And it's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that I'm spending that much time on Facebook every day. And once again, there's nothing wrong with Facebook. I like catching up with some of my old friends, but if I'm not careful, I can sit there and scroll for hours. And before I know it, I've just used up a lot of time that I can't get back. I have the bio said 9 grandkids, but I actually have 10 grandkids now, and 11 is on the way. And one of the things I like to do is spend time with them. So one of the things we can do for time is what I call sponge time. There's sometimes time where is taken up by waiting for things, and we can sometimes do some things during that time. One of my favorites is a guy I looked up to a lot. His name was Zig Ziglar. He passed away about 15 or 20 years ago, but he talked about he called it Automobile University, and for his day it was cassette tapes in the car. But we can listen to podcasts, we can listen to recorded books while we're driving instead of the news. To me, the news is just too depressing. So we can get some of those things done during that sponge time like that. If we're studying a language, I'm studying Italian right now. I lived in Italy for 2 years as a boy, and my mom was from Italy, and I was fluent in Italian, but then I lost it. And so I'm trying to gain that back. And sometimes if I'm waiting in the line at the grocery store, that I'll pull out my phone and practice my Italian to try to get better for that. So sometimes we can, it's not that we have to fill every minute of every day with activity. Sometimes we just need time to think and not do anything. But we can often find a little bit of time if we want to do some things where we're studying. TV and media can be such a huge time waster. If you think about using some of that time in another way, if you in the wintertime, I don't like to get outside when it's all icy. So I have some exercise equipment that I use inside, and I'll watch TV while I'm doing that, because it gets my mind off of how boring the exercising is. But I'm accomplishing something else. My main goal isn't to watch the TV. That's just to get my mind off of the torture I'm putting my body through. We can be sometimes more deliberate about the things we're doing. So I've actually taken Facebook off of my phone when I've spent too much time on it, because it was just too easy to go to that when I was bored or felt like I had, or what was the problem was I would spend too much time on it. It wasn't so much going to it when I was bored. A lot of times, even our teens, I wrote an article about this for teens who want to go to college, and our society has kind of lied to them, I think. If they have, and I know not every teen has this available, but if they have parents who say, you can live here as long as you're going to school, and we won't charge you, and we'll feed you, and we'll even help get you to school, and all they have to do is come up with the tuition and the books. The studies have shown that the average teen spends about 30 hours a week on various forms of media. That could be on their phone, on the computer, on different apps, watching movies. But the average teen spends about 30 hours a week. And if you just said at $15 an hour for minimum wage, if they worked that 30 hours a week instead, they're looking at earning $22,500 a year. And one time I priced out what the books and tuition would cost at Pikes Peak State College and University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. And both of those would be affordable if you don't have to pay for room and board and you worked 30 hours a week. So if you have a teen like that who is thinking about going to college, but they think they can't afford it, have them rethink that, because they probably could. Yes, it means they'd have to work, but they can work and go to college at the same time if they don't have a family they have to support. Another thing that a lot of people, adults and young people, get confused about is the multitasking is a myth. Our brains take about 5 minutes to change from one task to another. So if you're working on a project at work and then you get a notification on your phone and you go to check Facebook, and then you work for 5 minutes on your computer, and then you get another notification and you check your text message for 5 minutes, our brain going back and forth like that, we don't do anything efficiently. It doesn't mean we shouldn't ever check our phone, or sometimes we can't help it. If you're kind of keeping track of a kid, you may not be able to turn your phone off or put it away. But in most cases, we probably can. Then we can like focus for 45 minutes to an hour on our computer or whatever we're working on, the project we're working on, then take a break and actually give time to those messages that they probably deserve if they're from a friend of ours or something. So the myth of multitasking is just that. It's a myth. All of you on this Zoom call today can make yourself better financially next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And you could probably, if my wife and I could do it in 20 years, I know that all of you could be close to being millionaires. Sometimes the progress will be slow. Sometimes it will feel like you're not making progress. But I know that everybody could be capable of doing that. Any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, so there's two questions in the chat. The first one is, what other investments would you recommend? The second question is, are there any planned or apps you and your wife like that help? I don't know. It was posted by Brittany. If you could kind of elaborate on what you typed, and that
All
would be.
right. So I'm not a financial advisor, so I don't feel qualified to offer advice like that. I just know I'll give you the advice my financial advisor told me 20 years ago. He said, James, you're going to get monthly statements, and sometimes you're going to see that the investments you have for your Roth have gone down. Sometimes you're going to see it's gone up. He said, ignore all that. You're there for the long term, and he said that most people, they see it's going down or they hear on the news that it's going down and they pull their money out from what they're invested in. And then they hear that it's going up and they put their money back in. And if you try to time it like that, you're going to fail because everyone's doing that. And then it's too late. Once it's on the news, the bad things have already happened. And so he told us to just do what's called dollar cost averaging. So if we are putting a certain amount each month in our retirement, we put that in every month. We don't pay any attention to what's happening in the market because it's there for the long term. And that has worked really well for us. He got us in with a bunch of diverse things. So I know that's another thing that a lot of advisors will say is don't put all your eggs in one basket. So sometimes people will say something like, oh, Apple is doing really well, so I'm going to put everything into Apple. Well, then if Apple fails, then you lose quite a bit. But if you have it in 10 different things and 2 fail and 2 are doing really well, they're going to kind of balance each other out. There's going to be times in 2008, there was a time where we lost about 40% in a short amount of time of the value of our net worth, went down by about 40%. Right when COVID hit, it was the same thing. It went down by about 40%, but we just left everything in place and it came back. People even say the worst thing we read about in history is the 1929 stock market crash. And I think things went down by over 90% in that time. But if you had stuck it out, if in 1929 you said, okay, things look bad, but I'm just going to leave all my investments there, it would have taken a little bit longer that time. But by 1945, you would have gotten everything you had lost back and more. And then if you just kept it, it would have kept going. So that was the very worst one we've had in our history. And even then, if you had been able to stay, you would have done well. The people who suffered the most in that crash were people who thought they could borrow money, because this is what a lot of people were advising to do. Borrow this money at this interest rate from the bank, put it in these investments, and then in 2 months you can sell those investments and then pay back what you borrowed from the bank. And so a lot of people were speculating like that. And then when they lost a bunch, they still owed the money to the bank, but they had no equity in their stocks to sell it. As far as apps, I know there's some apps that are out there. I'm old school. That's another way of saying I'm old. And so I like to do everything by paper and pencil. So I just have a little spreadsheet for our budget, and everything that's coming in goes at the top, and then all of our expenses and the things our outgoes come in under that. And I do what's called zero-based budgeting. So at the bottom, I want it to equal zero. Now, it doesn't mean I don't have extra money, but like we were talking earlier, everything I do, I've decided in advance. So this amount is going into retirement. 150 a month right now is going to the next trip my wife and I want to take next year. So once I subtract that out and I send it to the savings account we have for that trip, at the very bottom, it comes out to zero. And that, for me, the spreadsheet, but I think there's apps that kind of work like a spreadsheet, that you can put in your income and your budget items. Anybody else?
I have a question. As an educator, do you think the value of encouraging your kids towards a college degree is worth it these days? It seems like a lot of people are wondering if that's a good investment for their money or more. I mean, I think trades are being encouraged more now.
That's a very good question. Thank you for raising that question up. I see that there's a lot of potential in all kinds of different areas. And I've always thought this way. So the very first school I taught at really pushed kids to go to college. And when you'd hear of one that wanted to join the military or something, a lot of times at that school, a lot of their peers were like disappointed in them. Like, why would you do that? You're going to throw your life away. Well, I think everybody is different. I joined the military at age 20. Actually age 19, and it was one of the best things for me to do. And so what I encourage is, with the cost of college, it seems silly to go spend 4 years there if you don't know what you want to do. But then you can't just not do anything. There's a lot of young people who sit on the couch and play video games and they're not working or anything. So what I tell young people today, if you don't want to go to college, that's fine. Go get a job, because your first job is going to teach you what you like and what you don't like. It's going to be hard. None of us, when we all look back, our first jobs were not things we would have wanted to do forever. I did a lot of landscaping and pulling weeds and hauling trash for people. I was glad with the money that brought in for me, but it wasn't something I never said, oh, I'm going to do this with my whole life. What I do encourage young people to do, though, is so I earned my bachelor's degree one course at a time over 10 years while I was in the Army. And what I was studying sometimes changed over that time. But I always tell them, if you think you might need college someday, take a college class here, work 40 hours a week, take a college class or two. And then that the same kind of thing is going to show you what you like and don't like. You might find out there's something you're really passionate about. So I think the trades are a really good option for a lot of young people today. And I do see a trend of that coming back. So that's cool to see that.
All right, and Ariel has her hand up for a question.
So it's kind of a comment. I think I'm like the only child here. I'm 13. I'm going into high school next year. And in my state, I'm homeschooled, but in my state, the state pays for 11 credit hours a semester for college courses. So we've mapped it out, and I want to be a vet. And we've mapped it out, and I can get, I think, two degrees that will help me in vet school to get through vet school faster and with less expenses. So if anyone has children, because I think it's all mostly adults here, if anyone has children who want to go to college for something, they could try that and see if that would help.
That's an awesome thing. And you seem like a very mature 13-year-old. So kudos to you for thinking ahead like that.
I was just about to say that she sounded very mature for 13.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another young lady I knew. She would probably be about 30 now. But she used to go to my church, and she did something. I know here in Colorado Springs, they have something called early college. And so she graduated from high school with her associate's degree. And then she really worked hard and finished her bachelor's degree in 1 year at University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. So she was 19 and had her bachelor's degree. And then she wasn't quite sure what she wanted to do after that. But she really progressed well. So way to go, Ariel. Anybody else?
Autumn has her hand up as well.
Sorry, I'm Adam's husband. So one of the things I would say, so I have my degree in electrical engineering, and one of the things I will say is that yes, I do believe going to college is a good thing. One of the things I always try to tell my nephew, and it's like for some of the younger viewers, is that to learn about taxes, because I don't think there's enough emphasis on taxes, and a lot of us are either overpaying in taxes, or we just don't know the rules of the game, right? And I think, like, from my studies and what I've studied, is that being not only a person who has been employed as an engineer, but also someone who has also owned their own business, like, there are, like, the majority of people who are working in a full-time job are paying more in taxes than anyone else. Like, for instance, an entrepreneur can write off a lot of their expenses, you know, on their taxes, and then really, as a tax write-off. So I would encourage, like, something I told my nephew, I was like, go to college. But if you go to college, make sure you know what you want to do. But if you go to college, also, I encourage you to study the tax laws. If I could go back and do it all over again, I would take a course on taxes. So, I mean, and that's just my perspective. However, I also have a question for you. Do you believe that you should scrimp and save your way up to wealth? Because, I mean, I guess I don't believe that you should have to wait until you're retired or 65 before you can enjoy life, right? And I understand, like, some people can't just, like, go on cruises all the time or whatever, because they're having, that they have a certain budget, or a certain financial constraint. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, what are your thoughts and opinions on that? Is what I'm trying
That's
to ask.
a great question. And I think I see people going to two extremes with it. So you do have to have a balanced life and have to still enjoy things. We still do things that we enjoy, and but sometimes it's more of like weighing what's important to you, like that. So the coffee thing, for example, you can either spend 3,600 a year on coffee, or you can spend it on something else. And so sometimes it's deciding what it's going to be. But I'll give you a real life example. So my mom always threw caution to the wind, and she never saved. And then she ended up being in her 70s and didn't have much money. Because one of the things she always got, like every 2 years, she would go get a brand new car. And she was like, well, I deserve this. I enjoy it. And that was fine. But then she had no savings. And so the things she wanted to do when she was older, she couldn't do. On the other hand, she had a friend who had 250,000 set aside. 250,000 is not as much as people think it would if you're depending on the income from that to sustain you. But she was, the point is, she wasn't poor. And she always would moan and complain. And I wish I could go see my grandkids. They live across the country. And my mom would give her good advice and say, take a little bit of that money and go see your, I think she lived in Virginia and her grandkids lived in California. It's like, take 2 trips a year, not go spend every weekend flying out there. But she was, in her fear, she was holding on to that money. So I would say it's got to be a balance. Yes, you have to live your life and you have to enjoy things. I feel like I've been unusual though, and I'll tell you why. I've enjoyed all the jobs I have had. I can't imagine not working. So it's changed, it's shifted how I've worked. Like now I actually retired from full-time teaching, and I teach half-time, and the other half the time I'm self-employed. But it's I just can't imagine not. I've always enjoyed what I've done and always enjoyed the work that I do. So I think you're right. Go
You
ahead.
probably would agree that if you're going to get a job, make sure it's something that you want to learn or something you would enjoy learning, as opposed to just getting a job and working because it pays well.
Right. Right. And I've
And
seen
I
so
know.
many people who they've gotten the ones that paid well. And I remember talking to a young lady one time, and she told me how much she hated her job. I said, why do you do it? And she said, well, it lets me take my trips on the weekend. And so it's like she was just living for her trips. I enjoy coming to you can see behind me, I'm in a classroom. I enjoy coming here to this school for my half-time job. I enjoy what I'm doing with self-employment. And I think that's key for young people. For Ariel, find something that you like. It sounds like you really like the thought of being a veterinarian. So those are things that finding that balance is right, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you right there. And I also would encourage, the younger ones to also take a class in finances, because I believe that just because you know how to run a business or because you're an engineer like myself doesn't mean we know about money, but money seems to be a part of our everyday life. So, to know how to save, how to invest your money and grow your money is probably something I wish I would have started earlier. In fact, I encourage my nephew, who's 14 now, to learn more about money, because I never had parents to teach me. And now that I'm older, I can kind of give him lessons about it. But it was like, man, I'm like, had somebody been showing me this when I was younger, I would have thought differently about money, and definitely would have, I would have spent my money differently in ways where I would have been further ahead. But anyways, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Aisha, I have to get going. I've got some students coming in just a couple of minutes. Those of you who came today, thank you so much for coming. I did put my website in the chat, so if you want to reach out further with a question or comment, I'd appreciate that. But I've got to go ahead and sign off.
Thank you so much,
Bye,
James.
everybody.
Thank you, James. All right.